What's up, party people, and welcome to this week's edition of Just Three with Joe. Of course, I'm your host, Mr. Joe Cardoza. I got a great show lined up for you guys this week, but before we even get started with anything, I want to wish everybody a very happy and safe holiday season. Enjoy the sweet treats. If you're like me, you're trying to end this year strong and getting yourself set up for an even better 2022. Larry Bazzani will be joining us this week. He'll be my guest. He is a do-it-all former producer at ESPN Radio for the John Thompson Show. RIP to Coach Thompson. But before we get into the great conversation with Larry and talk about the topics we're going to talk about, I want to shout out the sponsor for the 19 Media Group YouTube channel, and that's Rich Kid Clothing. Definitely want to shout out Mark Wilson and his team over there for lacing us with some of this fly, fresh gear that you'll see myself and other members of 19 Media Group sporting throughout our show. Like I said, Larry's joining us this week. We're going to talk about a lot. We're going to talk about Urban Meyer. We're going to do a little year in review as far as sports and also how COVID-19 is affecting the world of sports as well. So without further ado, let's jump right into the conversation with Larry and let's get this thing started. And as I mentioned this week, I'm super excited to have the former producer of the John Thompson Show, the legendary former Georgetown Hoya Hall of Famer, life-changing coach, RIP to Big John. He is out of the state of California, but he is DMV born and raised. Take the boy out the DMV, but you could not take the DMV out the boy. So at this time, I want to welcome to Just Three with Joe, Mr. Larry Bazzani.
Joe, good evening. How are you? Happy holidays.
What's going on, man? I'm doing good. Happy holidays to you too, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure to join you.
We're going to have to start right there with the shirt.
Well, I think you kind of said it all. I mean, you'll never take the DMV out of me. I'm a capital center veteran. If you go back to when our beloved Bullets were playing in Landover, and this shirt is a friend of mine, actually Bram Weinstein, formerly of ESPN. His friend owns the company. I saw the shirt. I said, I got to get one. So anyway, there you go, Washington, bro. It's all about the whiz kids.
Shout out to Bram too, who's doing broadcasting now for the Washington football team, actually on the radio, doing a really good job.
He sure is. I listen to him every time that we have a game here. I listen. I do what we used to do with Sonny, Sam, and Frank. I listen to Bram's broadcast and then watch the game, okay. And just I get the audio elsewhere. So Bram's one of a kind. One of the premier storytellers that I've ever been in and around. Just a joy to work with. Always on the ball. Very giving of his knowledge when I was younger. Spent a lot of time with me and would just answer questions that I had. One of the really nice guys in the industry. He's just a mensch, and so happy Hanukkah, Bram, and hope you're doing great wherever you are. If you pick this up, you left footprints in my heart about 20 years ago, man. So much respect to you, sir.
And Bram's a guy whose career trajectory has just been for a while now. So respect the grind and hustle and doing things the right way.
Yeah, I mean, and that's it's not a surprise for anybody who knew Bram behind the scenes. He was just always relentless, always working on his craft. Just a masterful storyteller. So Bram Weinstein.
Absolutely. Hey, well, let's jump right into it, man. I mean, obviously, it's everywhere. It's not just sports. It's in our day-to-day lives, and that's just COVID and what it's doing to sports as far as postponements. I mean, hey, today we saw, not that I was going to watch it, but still, it mattered to the kids in the team. You had the Hawaii Bowl, and you had Hawaii drop out due to COVID, and players also opting out. And you had the University of Memphis, I want to say it is. Yes. Forgive me for not having that written down, who flies out there. You go to Hawaii, you're prepped for the bowl game. Of course, there's worse places you can be than Hawaii, but there's no football game because that college decides to withdraw their team from the competition. We see NBA. I mean, it feels like every 5 seconds somebody's entering. Yeah, NHL. Somebody's entering health and safety protocols every 2 seconds. I mean, just now talking to you these last few minutes, probably 4 or 5 people entered it. What are your thoughts on just COVID and how it's affecting sports? Should they have a pause? What's your feeling on the whole situation as a whole?
Well, that's such a broad question. To break it down, sports has been an unbelievable break from the reality of the world in which we've been living.
Absolutely.
And I don't think that anybody can dispute the impact that losing sports in early last year in 2020, what that was like for society as a whole. It was the one thing that actually, when the Last Dance documentary came into play, it kind of brought back some sort of normalcy, because we were able to, even though we knew the results of the games and the outcomes and so on and so forth, it gave us that sense of normalcy that I feel that we had been missing for weeks, if not months at a time, and something to look forward to, something for us sports junkies to kind of sink our teeth into. So it does allow us to it gives us that 2-3 hour window away from the reality of the world in which we live. Um, because I mean, like, for example, on a personal level, I've been working from home now for a year and a half. I can get out into the field a little bit, but by and large, it's the world in which we live has transformed so much in the
Absolutely.
last
For sure.
20, 21 months, whatever it's been now. The reality is, though, that again, if you want to make this a local thing, if you look at what has happened to the Washington football team this past week, rather, um, COVID has COVID absolutely cost the team any opportunity to really be competitive in that game. Once it was decided that Heineke and a couple of other people were going to be on the inactive list, the ineligible list, whatever. Forgive me, I don't have it written down, but whatever the protocol entails, they have the line went from 3.5, I think it was, to 7.5, 8.5 points, whatever it ultimately ended up being. So it's become a more unpredictable situation than ever. I mean, normally at this point in the year, you can bake in a couple of injuries and
Yeah, for sure.
but I mean, you just never know. You're all pro, first team all pro wide receiver or quarterback or defensive end or whoever the game changer is that you have on your roster could be healthy as a horse, and all of a sudden he's out for the next 10 days.
Yeah.
So it's just a really difficult time, not only from from the perspective of what do you think the outcome is going to be, but I mean, perhaps this is less or more serious depending on who you are, but betting lines are all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And you also got guys also too. I mean, think about Odell Beckham Jr. has a coming out party for the Rams, and then less than 24 hours later, oh yeah, by the way, he played the game with COVID.
right.
And so now he's out. Or you think about Cleveland, who behind the scenes, I think, have no evidence to prove this, but I think pushed the NFL, hey, give us a chance to get Baker on the field. We're in the playoff hunt. We want the best opportunity to put our best foot forward. We move the game, and Baker still tests, positive for COVID and can't play.
I think any of that is reasonable to think that the higher ups, contingent upon their relationships, the clubs with the league offices. I wouldn't doubt any of that, just knowing the power and the sway that the NFL has as a whole, but also that some of these teams have. I mean,
For
they
sure.
know that it's their opportunity to strike while the iron is hot. Particularly Cleveland has been uh, not the best run organization, and certainly not playoff bound until last year for quite some time. I
Yep.
want to say the last time they were in the playoffs prior to this was perhaps even when Butch Davis was there. I'm not sure.
Oof.
But we're going back quite a while, and they are a competitive team now. They've got a very strong fan base. It's the Browns are not just a regional team. It's been I could see any of that happening, and I also think that it's the NFL is doing the best they can to try and put a product out there that is not that's palatable and that's reasonably competitive, and they want the teams to be able to be as competitive as they possibly can without endangering the lives of people.
Yeah, and I mean we're seeing it all across sports, like I talked about. I mean, locally, a team that I really follow closely, Georgetown Hoyas. I mean, their first two Big East games now, because of COVID-19, have been postponed or be rescheduled. I mean, the Big East came out and said if there's a COVID issue with your team, whatever particular team is deemed to have the COVID issue, it's a forfeit, and that was all the talk during the offseason. Of course, they've backed that off now and said, hey, we're going to work on rescheduling these games and not forfeiting. And I mean, look at the world of college football. They're talking about if one of the teams has a COVID outbreak that's in the college football semifinals, it's a forfeit and you move on. And I just can't. I was talking about this in another podcast that I do. I can't imagine like say you're Cincinnati, hey, we won by 2 forfeits. We're the national champs, having never set foot in the field. And we don't wish that at all. We want to see these teams as healthy as possible on the field and settle it on the field. But that's just the stark and harsh reality of the world we're living in right now. But that's possible. It could happen. You have a national champion because they won by forfeit twice.
Right. And, I used the word palatable earlier, and I mean, that's just not going to be palatable for anybody that you're going to become national champions contingent upon forfeits. The reality is we want to see teams compete at least at as much strength as they possibly can. And, nobody wants to go down the road of forfeiting. So,
yeah, that would just be, I mean, obviously, do you want to win the national championship? Great. But I can't imagine telling your kids a story of, oh, we had 2 forfeits and we're the national champs. They're going to be like, all right, Grandpa, if you say so. So there's no highlights. There's nothing we can watch. No, there was this thing called COVID that was going on. I mean, I guess the good thing will be it'll be behind us, so we can talk about what COVID used to do and how it used to affect us. But I mean, in terms of championships, I think that'd be one of the most odd championships. People give a lot of crap to the Lakers for winning in the bubble. Can you imagine winning a national championship by 2 forfeits?
right. No, and I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but ladies and gentlemen, please get vaccinated. We'll just leave it right there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Aaron, next topic I want to discuss is something that you and I have been talking about a lot off the air for weeks now, and that's Urban Meyer. I think what Sean Khan, the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars, was trying to do was think outside the box. Let me get somebody in here to be the head coach that, number one, has an offensive mind, because it was a lock that we're going to get the number 1 pick and they were going to pick up Trevor Lawrence. So I want somebody who can groom this generational quarterback to be as great as everybody thinks and as much as we hope him to be. And I also want to pick somebody who's a winner. And if you take a look at, put all the stuff aside that he's done wild and crazy, which is a lot, he's a winner. Whether it's Utah, Florida, Ohio State, the guy's gone in.
Bowling Green.
Yep. He's Bowling Green, excuse me. He's created winning programs. So you bring him in, and I mean, there are so many red flags. I mean, think about you get hired. You hired the former strength coach of Iowa, who had issues with
Chris Doyle, yeah.
Yep, issues with abusing players, racial issues he had, but you still bring him in, and we vetted him thoroughly. I've known him for 25 years. The heat comes down from the media, from fans. Within days, that person resigns. Then you got Tim Tebow, who's doing a hell of a job as an analyst for ESPN, covering college football and dabbling in minor league baseball in his spare time. And you bring him in, not to play quarterback, but to play tight end, a position he's never played before at all, which I think was a slap in the face to all those guys who are out there grinding, trying to fight for an opportunity to make an NFL roster. You bring your buddy in to play a position he's never played before, because we all know there was no way in the world Tim Tebow's competing with Trevor Lawrence. That's a waste of his time. That's just the first 2 red flags.
Well, and then, of course, there was the incident where he did not get on the team plane to go back from Cincinnati.
After a loss,
right. The whole we're a family, we're a team. And, where is he? He is off in Columbus at a bar that I believe bears his name. And videos emerge of his hands between the legs of a woman who is not his wife.
Hanging with the honeys.
And of course, the situation with the kicker. There's so much to unpack here. Where do we begin? The first, I will start with the Chris Doyle situation. The obvious is you're talking about a workforce that's 70+% African American. But the tacit understanding here should just be, why would you associate with somebody who has this track record of racism to begin with, regardless of whether or not your workforce is 5% Black or 5% Latino or whatever the case may be? Is that somebody that you really want to hitch your wagon to and say, that's my guy? I mean, that's somebody that, again, hey, maybe you go have a drink with him at some point. Maybe you go out and get something to eat, but to hitch your professional reputation to somebody who is just stained on that level, egregious. But to peel the onion back a layer further, I also have to kind of question Shad Khan a little bit, because this is a guy he wants to bring on, you're looking at that resume and, well, wait a minute, isn't this the guy that had this issue at Iowa? Is this something I want to bring in the room to my organization? I
Not
think
just
there
that,
has to be
Larry,
some.
but not just that, excuse me, but I think at that time too, when he was hired, I don't think the situation was resolved. It was still ongoing
Right.
with
I was
Iowa.
still on. You're
He
spot
wasn't
on.
working. He wasn't working for the program anymore at the college, but the issue hadn't been solved. So he has this baggage, which is still current, but I'm gonna bring him on anyway.
Right. And the truth of the matter is this: Shad Khan is one of the wealthiest owners in the NFL. I mean, he has
True
a
story.
net worth. Yeah. I want to say it's an 11-figure net worth, if I remember correctly. But this is somebody who has not made money by being a dummy. So that was pretty disappointing, and that was a pretty tough pill to swallow from the outside looking in, as to how Urban was able to get that one passed in. I understand that there are clauses in coaching contracts where they're allowed to bring in their guys, but by the same token, okay, the line has to be drawn somewhere. The Tim Tebow situation, I don't want to get into it too deeply, other than to say it was egregious.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure that Tim Tebow was a wonderful man. My brother is disabled, and I believe that Tim was involved in an event that my brother was at a couple of years ago. I don't dispute that he is a wonderful man, very strong in his convictions, his faith.
Yeah. Same.
He's not an NFL player.
Proven numerous
Let's
times.
just get right down to the brass tacks here. He not a quarterback, and certainly best case scenario as a tight end, he could possibly have been more of a pass catching tight end as opposed to a blocker. But how do you tell a guy to put his hand in the dirt when he's never done it? Oh, and by the way, he's in his 30s at this point, and
Yeah, for sure.
you're going to cut through. You're going to go past the entire line of qualified people because you were a quarterback and now you're going to be brought in to play tight end, and you haven't even been on an NFL roster in, I want to say, almost a decade. So
Yep.
that's that had to have left a pretty sour taste in a lot of people's mouths. There were also a couple of other incidents that were skated over just because of the bombshells that continued to go off. That apparently a couple of people had challenged Urban to fight it, to a fist fight at one point, or that the engagements there were just so volatile that it was on the verge of becoming a powder keg. The situation with Lambo, I think one of the things that people have kind of skated over is this. People are quick to say, "Oh, well, he kicked the kicker. He's lucky he didn't do this to a defensive end. He's lucky he didn't do this to a linebacker. He's lucky he didn't do this to an offensive lineman." I don't dispute that. One thing that people are overlooking is that, in particular, remember this: NFL contracts, 100% of them, with the exception of maybe Kirk Cousins, 100% of that contract is not guaranteed. Furthermore, when you're talking about a kicker, you're talking about, these are contracts that by and large are only guaranteed for that 1 year, if that, and it's a marginal percentage of that. You're talking about a guy who had a contract for $1.6 million.
Yeah.
A whole heck of a lot of us would put up with a lot of crap for $1.6 million.
Hell yeah.
So to say, well, he kicked the kicker and so on and so forth. Okay, I realize that $1.6 million is chump change when you're talking about what Russell Wilson makes, or
Yeah.
a top flight quarterback, a top flight wide receiver, defensive end. $1.6 million in the real world, that is a significant amount of money, and I understand why he would
Be
kind
quiet.
of feel, yeah, like
Yeah,
I have to do
sure.
everything I can to protect my job. Um, would I put up with somebody kicking me? Probably not. But there again, if I had a $1.6 million contract, you certainly start to question, okay, how much of this am I willing to take? Am I willing to take that? Probably not. But for $1.6 million, I'm going to take a deeper breath, and I'm going to put up with a little more than I would if I were making less than $1.6 million. So just a little bit of food for thought there. But then and also the situation with I'm not here to get between him and his wife, but the situation that happened in Columbus is egregious on so many levels. Number one, this is a woman that he's with who is not his wife, yet this is a man who constantly professes that he is a devout Roman Catholic and completely committed to his faith, and so on and so forth. And he's a family man. He's this. He's that.
Taught a course on leadership at Ohio State.
Right. So there's a lot there, and then to see the video of him with his hand in this woman's crotch, pretty ghastly stuff. I do think that what will probably ultimately shake out of this is, I would imagine that somewhere in the middle they will agree to terms. I can't see how. I don't know what the language and the words of Urban's contract are. Obviously, that's going to be largely kept confidential. But there is got to be. I would think there would be clauses in there around behavior and public image and that sort of thing.
Pretty sure I read somewhere that he doesn't get a dime, that the contract's voided.
They will push for that, and conversely, Urban will say something to the effect of, "Well, I was given 4 years, 5 years to get this program turned around," and I think that Urban probably has his work cut out for him. But again, it really depends on the ifs and ands and how the I's are dotted and how the T's are crossed in that contract. I suspect that they will probably give him an undisclosed amount of money
to go away,
to just go away.
Now, we talk about some of the coaches that you and I have seen in our lifetime. You think about the old ball coach and what he did with Washington. You think about the first version of Bill Belichick, the first version of Pete Carroll, Rich Kotite. I mean, there's been some really, really bad NFL coaches. To me, this little short saga of Urban Meyer, top 2, top 3 worst NFL hirings of all time. For me, it is. What about you? Where's it ranking you? I know we've seen a lot of bad coaches in football. He's top 2, top 3 for me, easily. Easy.
I think given what the expectations were and given the fabulous way in which everything flamed out, couple that with the record, the culture that just went from, I didn't think it was going to end well, and it went even worse. I think it's very easy to make a case that this was not only the worst hire in NFL history, but this is the biggest. This is probably the biggest train wreck in the history of the NFL in quite a long time. You would be really hard pressed to find anything along these lines, short of perhaps fatalities. But at the coaching, maybe I'm thinking about the Henry Ruggs incident a couple months ago. But in terms of just hiring a coach who is supposed to be a leader of men, who is supposed to have his finger on the pulse of that locker room, who is supposed to keep things sacred, I can't think of anything even close.
Yeah, not me either. The only thing I think that might come somewhat close to this, and I'm going to butcher his name. I should have practiced saying it a bunch of times before we recorded. Left the Atlanta Falcons to go back to Bobby Petrino. Left in the cover of darkness. He might
Bobby Petrino
top 5-ish, but this Urban Meyer, like you said, the exit is so spectacularly bad. That's what makes him like top 3 to me of the worst hirings of all time.
Yeah, I mean, you can look back at some of the college coaches. There are 2 that I think really
Chip Kelly.
Kind of tepid there. Had a little bit of success early on. There are 2 or 3 that I can think of that have really been able to, that really were able to establish themselves in the NFL. And in sequential order, I would say John Robinson, Jimmy Johnson, and Pete Carroll.
I always forget about John Robinson and those Rams teams. Jim Everett, Henry Ellard, Flipper Anderson.
Eric Dickerson, my guy. Yep. So
Kevin Green,
Flipper Anderson, Roman Pfeiffer.
Roman Pfeiffer. Who was offensive lineman? Jackie Slater. Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, Jackie Slater,
God,
Hall of
we're
Famer.
old.
Yeah, no, my
People
greatest memory
watching are
of
like, who the hell are they talking about?
it. Yeah, no, I'm not going to turn to the side. My temples are, oh, they're white as a ghost. But yeah, so I would say, John Robinson, he was able to make that transition. Jimmy Johnson, of course, was
Yeah.
in my opinion the
The
best to ever
best.
do it,
Yeah, absolutely.
both on the collegiate and the professional level. And Pete Carroll has been unbelievably successful. Obviously, a lot of that has been you can attribute to Russell Wilson, but I think it's also understanding that you're dealing with grown men. You're dealing with men that are making as much, if not more than you. Excuse me, in many cases. You can't dangle a scholarship over them and think that they're going to be threatened or put off by that. These guys are you're dealing essentially with 53 individual corporations,
Yeah.
and
Good point.
you have to treat them as such. These are men that have wives, they have families. You're not talking about an 18, 19-year-old kid who is just hoping to make it to that next level, or who just wants to be able to get a degree and then perhaps he doesn't have necessarily what it takes to play at the NFL level, but he got a 4-year degree, and now he wants to do something else with his life. You know, that's you're dealing with people at very different points in their life. I was a very different person at 18 than I was at 22, 23 years old. So
Hell yeah. Aren't we?
yeah.
Weren't we all?
Yeah. So all I say to that is thank God that we didn't have internet and social media
Man,
around at
yes.
that time, because there are definitely some skeletons there. But Jimmy Johnson was able to make that transition, and going in the opposite direction, I would say also Herm Edwards never won a Super Bowl, but he has been he was a successful NFL coach and has done a pretty nice job here at Arizona State.
Yeah.
So,
I'm a
but
big Herm fan. The game was supposed to pass him by, and I know they got some controversy going on right now at Arizona State with recruiting and things of that
yeah,
nature. But wins and losses, what he's been doing so far, I think he's been doing a damn good job at ASU.
yeah, phenomenal. And so I think but again, it's really understanding the psychology of where your players are at that time, and I just think that, like you said, the red flags were there. I did not get the sense that Urban's style was going to work at the NFL level. I was pretty disappointed when you look at some of the coaching candidates that were
Oh,
clearly out there
man.
and available. Yeah, Eric Bieniemy. You also had Brian, guy in Buffalo. His last name slips my mind. The offensive coordinator there, Dable. But I do think that Shad Khan has a chance to potentially get this right.
Yeah.
There was a quarterback that was drafted out of Marshall a few years, I guess, probably about 18 years ago. He was a good quarterback, known for he's a big guy. He was cerebral. He played in Jacksonville. He went to Tampa for a while. I believe he ended up in Pittsburgh for a little while. Now
Yep.
he's an offensive coordinator at Tampa. He has the Jacksonville ties, and that's Byron Leftwich. He's an offensive coordinator. You don't get any more street cred than I'm the offensive coordinator for Tom Brady. So I think that if I were Shad Khan, I would get through the next month or so, see when and where Tampa, how far they go. They certainly have the makeup to go all the way again. And one of the first calls I would make would be to Byron Leftwich, kick the tires, at least see whether or not that you could make that happen. I think that also there's a generational component to it. He was a quarterback. He's what's Byron now, 40, 41 years old.
Probably. Yeah, around there.
So that he's not so old and so removed from the game that he can't relate to Trevor Lawrence and be able to sit down with him and say, son, here's what I picked up during my time in the league. This
Yeah, for
is
sure.
when I was the face of this franchise. This is what I did and how I did it. Also coming from that culture in Pittsburgh where he was under Mike Tomlin, and the Steelers are just a huge brand. I'm sure that his journey has been nothing short of the equivalent of a PhD. Um,
I like that.
Byron Leftwich is definitely on my short list if I'm Shad Khan.
Well, another name I hear people talk about, and it makes sense to me. Think about those Eagles when they lost Chip Kelly. I mean, I won't say the franchise was destroyed, but in disarray. And then you bring in former backup quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles, Doug Peterson. And what's he do? Oh,
Sure.
he wins a Super Bowl. And he also knows quarterbacking and knows offense. So, I mean, if you don't want to take a chance on Byron Leftwich because you're afraid of first-year head coach, what if you can't handle the job, or Eric Bieniemy, you feel the same way, even though they deserve a job for sure, both those guys, and have the resumes. If you're unsure because you don't want to be the first, I think you bring in a guy like Doug Peterson who has that credibility. I think that could be also a successful person. That's somebody who would be on my short list that I'd reach out to as well if I was Jacksonville.
Oh, sure. I mean, anytime that you can hold your fist up like this and put a Super Bowl ring in front of an owner, that alone is worth a 2 hour sit down getting to know you. Let's
For
go
sure.
grab a bite to eat. Let's go get a drink. That Doug Peterson, you could certainly do a lot worse than Doug Peterson. And I think in hindsight, as we saw and heard so much of what came out of Philadelphia and how allegedly dysfunctional it was internally, uh, apparently Doug Peterson did a very good job in terms of being able to keep a lot of that stuff out of the media. That's one of the things that I think that, particularly now living in the world of social media, that it's become an increased role for head coaches as well as being able to contain that ecosystem without letting a lot of that
Yeah.
stuff leak out. I think Mike Tomlin did a phenomenal job with that with Antonio Brown, and you see
Yeah.
it again with Le'Veon Bell and Chase Claypool. He's been able to really kind of keep the focus here as opposed to what's going on over there and that kind of thing. So um, I can see what you're saying. That's also a credit to Doug Peterson. Like you said, Eric Bieniemy, Brian Dable. There are a lot of wonderful candidates out there, and and who's to say that Daryl isn't going to be able to turn this thing around and maybe get a couple of wins? Perhaps you close the season with a couple of really nice divisional wins, and certainly at that point he becomes a candidate as well. Uh,
Yeah,
I
I
think
think they're good. I think regardless of the win-loss record, they're going to give him a shot just because he's in house. And what I mean by a
sure.
shot is they'll give him an interview.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as somebody who is an organizational behavior major, I mean, you have to look at all of the components that you have going on here. You've got a 22-year-old franchise quarterback that I would say is the most touted since Cam Newton or Andrew Luck.
Yeah, I'd say Andrew Luck for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you get a guy like this about once a decade. He is a guy who is regionally from that's sort of that geographical footprint. I mean, Florida, went to school in South Carolina, then now he's playing in northern or Georgia rather. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Went to school in South Carolina, plays in northern Florida now. You have to weigh all of that into the equation. You also have to think about his age. You want to get somebody who he can relate to, somebody who has played the position, like you said, maybe Peterson, Leftwich. Um, there are. It's about fit here, and you got one more chance to really get this right before this kid ends up going the way of
David Carr.
yeah, or uh, name slips my mind right now. Went to UCLA just a couple years ago. Josh
Oh, Josh Rosen.
Rosen, thank you.
Yeah.
So Trevor Lawrence is too promising a talent to leave on the side of the road, and I really hope for his sake and for just as a football fan in general that we can get that Shad Khan can get that hire corrected.
Yeah, and it blows my mind that it was just 5 years ago, I think it was, that you remember Jacksonville in the AFC Championship game.
Oh,
One
sure.
one
Yeah.
interception that wasn't an interception call away from going to the Super Bowl. And
Yep.
you talk about how the mighty have fallen. It's just incredible to see where they were and where they are now. And I mean, obviously, if you take a look at that roster that was in that AFC Championship game, I think I read somewhere only one player from that team is still on the Jacksonville Jaguars team. And I know NFL has free agency and turnover, but I mean, it just says a lot about the culture. So there's
Oh, yeah.
probably a ton of teams in the NFL that have 6, 7, 8 plus players from 5 years ago or 4 years ago still playing on their franchise. But with Jacksonville, it's a revolving door of different players playing different positions, and you want to get some kind of stability there for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you've got your work cut out for you to begin with. That
Yeah.
Northern Florida, Jacksonville in particular, it's still a collegiate town. It's very much a Gator town. You're fighting an uphill battle just in that regard. If you want to be able to really put your stake in the ground and make this a formidable franchise once and for all, um, you have a lot of things working against you, but you really have to get this hire right. I mean, again, Jacksonville is a very transient city. It's a military town.
Yep.
So you're not going to have people who are going to grow up with the Jaguars and next generation and so on and so forth. It's not like a lot of the teams in the Midwest or in the Northeast, where generationally my father took me to the Giants games. I went with my grandfather to the Bears games, the Packers games. Somebody could spend 4 years in Jacksonville if they're in the Navy, and then the next thing you know, they're in Utah, they're in California, they're wherever. So if you're gonna make this a formidable franchise, you got to get out of jail free ticket, in the sense that you cleaned house, you fired him, you didn't wait till the end of the year, and I think that speaks volumes about Shad Khan's character, in the sense that he's willing to say, you know what, mea culpa, I screwed this one up, I got to go get this right, but you can't continue to go back to the well. You got to get it right this time.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Now, we talked about at the top of the show. Obviously, we're in the midst of the holiday season. Christmas is at the time of this recording. Christmas is tomorrow. And with that, people are talking about the year and the year in review and some of the moments and things that happened. And I mean, obviously, we talked about COVID and how that's had a huge impact on sports more lately, kind of more than did the beginning of the year. But with that being said, we still had some great moments and some great things that happened in the world of sports. When you think about the year 2021, I mean, I think about one thing that I've been passionate about is people in college getting their just due for their name, image, and likeness. So for me, the NIL finally coming to fruition and people be able to make money off their name, image, and likeness is probably like the top moment of the year for me, because it's been long overdue. And of course, we spent a lot of time talking about what could have been. Think about the Reggie Bushes, the Fab Fives, when those guys are playing, the amount of money they could have made. Even a lot of the female athletes, and not just in the major sports, but female athletes that dominated the particular sport they played in, they could have made some serious money.
And there is the component, whether we want to talk about it or not. Good looks sell. Okay.
Absolutely. Let's be real. Let's be real.
When you have somebody who looks like Skylar Diggins, she could have made a whole heck of a lot of money when she was at Notre Dame as well. But I think you could start to see this coming. LeBron had our governor here in California, Gavin Newsom. He had him on the talk show where he signed something, and you could see that the wheels were coming into play, and that the wheels were starting to turn, and that something like this was going to be coming down the pike. I remember, gosh, I hate to say this, 25 years ago, when my mother and I had a conversation about education versus becoming a professional athlete, and that very, very fine balance. And what tipped my mother's scale was, my mother was very much an educator. What tipped my mother's scale was Allen Iverson. Allen Iverson had a sister who had some medical expenses at that time. I don't quote me on what they were, but I know that I believe it was kidney, or it was related to, it was some sort of organ failure. And he had 6 figures worth of medical bills for his sister. And the situation was, John Thompson had never let a player go pro early.
Yeah.
But you can't get any higher than becoming the first pick in the draft. And it was pretty clear, although we look back at that 96 draft as one of the greatest drafts of all time, with Kobe and Steve Nash, and you can go straight down the list, Marcus Camby. I mean, there's just so many people in that draft. But
yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, Ray Allen. I mean, my God,
Antoine
Steph
Walker.
Marbury. Just go on and on and on. But at the time, it was clear that Allen Iverson was going to be the first pick in the draft. And if you have an opportunity to remove your family from the situation in which his family was living at that time, and really be able to provide for his mother, his siblings, but particularly his sister from a medical perspective, you make that move. And would he have been able to do that in today's world, or would he have been able to stay in school in today's world? Well, potentially. Um, but again, there are a lot of kids that, particularly you look at the NFL, you still have to wait 3 years.
Yeah,
What about these kids who are coming from situations that are similar to Chuck's situation, where Bubba Chuck, Allen Iverson, who's coming from situations like that, where, okay, now I have the NIL, I can make money through this gym who sponsors my university, or this other organization wants to throw some
absolutely.
money behind us, or some tech company who wants to get some publicity out of this, or somebody on Instagram who wants to back me. There are so many opportunities now for these young men and women to make money, and that really excites me
Yeah.
as well. So, and I'll see your NIL, and I will match it with the Milwaukee Bucks winning the NBA championship this year. I think
Okay.
where I'm going to go with this is a couple of places. Number one, a lot of people had largely checked out if you were in a smaller market, if you weren't in a New York or an LA or or Miami or something, a Dallas, Chicago, that, well, my team is always going to be an also ran for the rest of my life. And here, Milwaukee, I don't know where they rank in terms of market size, but they're certainly not a top 10 market. And to be able to make the right moves, put together a beautiful arena, I would love to go out there and see it. That Deer District has become iconic,
Yeah, that was
and
wild.
to
COVID
be,
be those fans are like COVID be damned. We want to see our team win a chip,
yeah,
man.
it was really something to behold. And furthermore, that you take a kid such as Giannis Antetokounmpo, who was labeled
Mhm.
a project, had a world of potential, but again, we don't know what he's going to be like. He didn't play against he wasn't an AAU kid. He didn't play against these kids in a D1 level. Well, you can put 20 or 30 pounds on him. Let's see what kind of a desire he has. Let's see what kind of mental strength he brings to the game. And Giannis will go down as one of the no less than top 20 players of all time.
Yeah, nah, I think his story is a Hollywood story. It's incredible. Like that,
Oh,
I don't know who
absolutely.
they're going to find to play him. He's so
Yeah.
tall and lanky, but that's going to be a movie, and I'm going to watch it when it comes out because the story really is incredible. When you think
Oh,
about what he was
yeah.
doing, a ball boy for his brother, we've seen the pictures of what he looks like during the draft, and of course, you've seen people gain muscle and get in shape, but this guy's gained muscle and gotten in shape, and he's MVP and just dominating. And we can talk about, well, the Brooklyn Nets coulda, shoulda, woulda. Well, we don't talk about, they lost. They beat Brooklyn. And then when they went up
Yeah.
against Phoenix, they were down in that series. A lot of people were saying, well, there goes Milwaukee doing what we thought they were going to do. It's Phoenix's series to lose. And the Suns are going to be champs. And then Giannis and company said no. And as a team, they come back, they win the series. I mean, the whole thing is just, it's a Hollywood movie.
Yeah. Giannis and company, put on their chin straps and said it was time to go to work. And forgive me if I'm wrong, Joe, but I cannot think of any greater finale performance than 50 points to close out a team that you were favored to lose to.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I can't think of one either, actually.
I mean, I think Jordan's last game with the Bulls, I want to say he had 45, and but 50 points, just putting that team on his back. A friend of mine who has since passed away, in a very tragic manner, is from Greece, and he was in tears that night. So it's Giannis's story is second to none. He gives hope to a lot of players that I think that it's safe to say now that we no longer dismiss international players as they're soft, they're this, they're that. That has been something that started building, I would say, with Drazen Petrovic, and again evolved a little bit further with Tony Kukoc. Of
Tony
course,
Kukoc was soft, Larry. Tony Kukoc was
uh,
soft. He's soft.
he could mix it up a little bit, but yeah, I mean he was not considered to be a bully. But and then you look at a guy like Dirk Nowitzki. It's still hit or miss, but now you look at a Yao Ming, you look at a Giannis, you can take a player from a foreign country and say, okay, if this guy has it here, uh, he could become a franchise player. But also, more importantly, it gives teams like the Grizzlies with a young nucleus, with John Morant, and some of the other, Utah with Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, and some of the other smaller markets, that Cleveland now without LeBron, for example. I
Yeah,
mean,
playing outstanding basketball. I'm
oh
shocked by
my
the Cavs this year.
goodness,
Shocked. Like fifth in
it's
the East.
yeah. I mean, where did that come from? So it's no longer just Boston or New York or the Lakers. It's now you have teams that are in these second tier markets, these cities that are not necessarily international cities. And wait a minute, we can build something special right here. So, and I think that we had really gotten away from that. Yeah, I mean, I have to really think long and hard. I have to go back. See, San Antonio is kind of an outlier, but other than that, I mean, I can't really think of any smaller market team that was able to really go in and dominate, with the exception of the Spurs.
Yeah, I'm
You
kind of
know,
in the same boat. I can't think of anybody either, actually,
I mean,
besides
even
San
Detroit's
Antonio.
a pretty international city from an automotive perspective. So, but to be able to come out of Milwaukee and win it all was just unbelievable. A couple other things that jump out at me from the year that was. The Atlanta Braves had all but disappeared for 20 years. Them winning the World Series.
Yeah, for sure.
Rest in peace, Hank Aaron, who passed away earlier this year. Um, Perhaps the most iconic Brave of all time.
Oh, he is. Yeah.
Yeah. Baylor breaking through and beating Gonzaga. Like
Beating,
what?
keyword.
Oh yeah, they
That's another
like they
level of
owed him
defense.
money.
That brought back like memories of the Nolan Richardson's 40 minutes of hell, the
Of
Rick
hell,
Pitino
yeah.
full court press all game long. I mean, they got in Gonzaga's jock straps that game, man.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I think there was some chatter around some of the posts online about that Gonzaga has not produced a real dog since John Stockton, and I think it showed last spring that there is still something to be said for just being gritty and tough. And this could be the Zags year. Who knows? They had a couple of early losses, but we'll see what happens there. I'm really excited about what my San Francisco Dons are doing, and I can't wait to see them square off. So, college basketball is always a treat to you and me in particular, and I think for a lot of our viewers as well. So that will be the college basketball season this year will be very interesting. It's also worth noting that Mark Few is going to be an assistant on the men's national team for the
Yep,
Olympics.
saw that.
Um, Congratulations to Steve Kerr, by the way. And that perhaps this is going to be Gonzaga's year. If
College
there's,
basketball is so unpredictable. I just do not
oh
feel
yeah,
comfortable saying that yet, especially
yeah.
when
I
you're
mean,
still in
it
COVID.
goes back to also what we were saying before about COVID in general. I mean,
Yeah,
one of these kids comes down with it, and one or two players go down, and it's a wrap for you in basketball. Something that's going to hit a little near and dear to your heart is the success last year of Jawan Howard.
yeah,
We were talking before about college football coaches making the transition to the NFL. Um, if Jawan Howard makes another deep run with Big Blue this year, you're going to have a couple of boosters write some pretty significant checks to keep him around, because I would be shocked if the NBA doors aren't going to start knocking.
yeah. He's
Uh,
definitely doing an outstanding job changing that culture and creating the team. I mean, when he got the job, that the emotion that was genuine, and that's something you don't see from a lot of people. And that was number one, his alma mater. I'm sure.
yep.
Think about the people that helped him get to that moment, the grind, those nights where he thought, "Is this for me or not for me?" And then to finally have the opportunity, all that was released, and that was just something you don't see every day. Which showed to me that he really takes the job seriously, and it showed with the way that team performs in the court and the effort the players give him.
I would be, unless it were a real plum situation, I don't think that he's going to go back to coach a lottery team in the NBA. And I can pinpoint that to a photo that was taken a couple of weeks ago when Michigan beat Ohio State, and you
Yeah.
saw Jim Harbaugh embrace Juwan Howard
Yep.
immediately after the game. You use the word real. That
Yeah.
was very real. You're talking about two guys who, again, it's their alma mater. They love Michigan, but it's safe to say that the temptation is going to be there, because somebody. I would be shocked if an NBA franchise didn't put a boatload of money on the table for Jawan to
Yeah.
at least consider.
Nah, we'll definitely have to see. We talk about Hollywood stories with Giannis. I mean, another Hollywood story we saw in the NFL was Tom Brady. I mean, obviously it was his first time being a free agent. We didn't know what was going to
You love those
happen.
Michigan guys. Oh no, what's
Well,
up with that?
it was just a great story. I mean, when he signed, I didn't know where he was going to go. First of all, New England was like Fort Knox in terms of information coming out. So you started hearing all these things about the rift between Belichick and the issues they're having, and it became less and less unlikely pretty quickly that he was going to re-sign with New England. So it's okay, where does he go? Does he? I heard Carolina, which I thought was crazy. We heard the Denver Broncos. Is he going to go back home, and go to the 49ers? Are they going to get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo? And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it's Tampa Bay, and you're like, who? The Bucks. So he goes to Tampa Bay, and my expectations were like they'll make the playoffs because Tom Brady's their quarterback, and they'll lose like in the first round or second round of the playoffs. And when they started off the season, kind of inconsistent. I mean, obviously, had that first loss against the Saints, his arch nemesis, all of a sudden now. And you're kind of like, well, they're still trying to learn the ropes. He's trying to learn the organization and the team. How's that Bruce Arians relationship going to work? The Byron Leftwich and Tom Brady relationship going to work? And all of a sudden, just clicked and things hit. And once you get in the dance, which is the NFL playoffs, anything can happen. They get in the playoffs, they win, they go to the Green Bay, they win the game against the Packers, and all of a sudden, wow, as if there was not enough in the legacy of Tom Brady, you're the first team to ever host a Super Bowl. And oh yeah, you win against the next great big thing in the NFL, known as Patrick Mahomes. Just
Win
all the
running
things,
away.
yeah, all the things that happened. It just was in COVID again, dealing with that, navigating that, which was a lot worse last year than it is now. Just an incredible chapter in the book of Brady, in my opinion, and one of the best moments of the year.
You know, my hat's off to him. You know, I did not. I would say that a lot of us from the outside looking in probably had projected about the same trajectory as you just said, Joe, that it would be a first or second round playoff, or at least they'd be 9-7, and that probably Drew Brees would run away with the division. And that, but you know, if nothing else, that he would at least transform that organization, that franchise, from an also ran to okay, they're at least they're a formidable team. I saw we saw right away what he had to work with in terms of weapons, and you know, okay, well,
everybody wanted to play there.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
Sean McCoy, Antonio Brown from
Leonard
rose out the
Fournette,
ashes,
sure.
or I guess out the jail cell.
Yeah. Leonard Fournette, you know, now Richard Sherman. I mean, yeah, people are just loading up um, to go and play with him, and I thought that there would be a drop off. He is on the short list of MVP candidates for this year.
Agreed.
What do you say? We've never seen anything like Tom Brady. He is the most decorated quarterback to ever play the game. You know, I'm gonna fight for Joe Montana kicking and screaming as the greatest I've ever seen. And
I did for a while, but no, probably the last 2 or 3 years, I've let that ship sail.
you know, but it's awfully, yeah, it's become increasingly difficult to argue with 7 rings. Something else that I think is worth noting as well is boxing is back. You know, you see the Tyson Fury Deontay Wilder fight. All of a sudden, for the first time in, I have to go back to Holyfield, Lennox Lewis, the end of Mike Tyson's career, to think about when I would see people flocking to a bar who were just casual fight fans, who were not diehards, to go and watch a fight. Um, the Fury Wilder fight. I was in Florida for a wedding at that time, and as I'm walking down the street, I say I've got to find a bar. Oh wait, okay. There are three people. There are three bars as I'm walking down the street, and there are people all hovered around the outside. Okay, they've got the fight, they've got the fight, and they've got the fight. And so, and I don't remember a buzz like that. Again, I have to go back to maybe maybe the Mayweather Pacquiao fight. But in the heavyweight division, we haven't seen anything like this in 25 years.
Yeah, nah, for sure. No, I definitely agree with you that. I am not, I wouldn't even consider myself a casual boxing fan, but I watched that fight. I stayed up for it because the buzz, all the talk, I wanted to see it. That wasn't one of those fights where you wake up the next morning and either you read how the fight ended up or you watch a highlight of a knockout punch. I wanted to see it from the beginning to the end because I wanted to see if it matched all the hype. And everyone was talking about how great these two fighters are, which is obviously true. I wanted to see them go toe to toe and see who the best man would be to win it. So I mean, for me as a guy who's not a boxing fan, I'd say like on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm probably like at a 3 or 4 with my boxing fandom. But with that fight, I wanted to watch it. I wasn't gonna wake up.
Absolutely.
I wasn't gonna wake up and be like, oh, I won by TKO and keep it moving. No, I wanted to see it, and I'd watch it
Right.
again. It was definitely entertaining.
Oh yeah, I was I don't even know that I was crawling when the Thrilla in Manila happened. So I certainly have not lived through a heavyweight trilogy like that. But the first and the third fight were two of the most spectacular heavyweight competitions that I've ever seen.
And I got 3 rapid fire moments of 2021 as we get towards the end of our time. I want to talk about Candace Parker going back home. You,
Sure.
you leave the Sparks, you go to Chicago, change Tom Brady, a female version of Tom Brady's story, basically.
Sure.
You go back home, you change the culture and impact the sky, you make it to WNBA finals, you bring a title back home. That's just that scene of her embracing family, friends that have seen her in
That
high
was pretty
school as a
awesome.
child. Yeah, it's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. That's definitely one of my top moments of the year. We saw one of the greatest female soccer players of all time, Carly Lloyd, who had one of the greatest goals I've ever seen. That
Oh
60
yeah.
that 60 yard or whatever it was in the World Cup. You see her hang up her cleats. Just a great moment to see how great of a career she had and see the send off she got. And it was also on a personal level to have my company, Nuts and Bolts Sports, in the stadium that night to cover that her last game as a professional playing for the United States women's national team. Definitely one of the top moments for me of the year as well. And then the last thing my last moment, something that's been talked about a lot, but behind closed doors, and now we see it being brought to the forefront, is athletes in terms of mental health. So just seeing Simone
Yes.
Biles and what she did in the Olympics and how she handled herself with grace. You think about Naomi as well, how they handled themselves and kind of navigated through that and came back on their terms when they wanted to, not when we wanted them to. And that being acceptable by society, I thought was one of the bigger moments too of the year. Might even be the biggest moment of the year.
I think that what they did makes these athletes that we see on TV and that we watch on our phones, et cetera, it makes them so human. That they are going through trials and tribulations like so many of us do on a daily basis.
Yeah,
I just saw something the other day online about how you have to be kind to people. I'm paraphrasing here. Um, Lydia Cornell, who was on Too Close for Comfort many years ago, I shouldn't say that too loud. Lydia, she was on a show that's no longer on the air. She's a dear friend of mine. So Lydia, if you're watching this, I love you to death and happy holidays to you. But she posted something that sort of outlined that we don't know what people are going through right now. This is in many cases this is their first or last holiday with a family, a friend, a loved one, but also ju- just that we don't really know what's going on with people behind the scenes. You start to hear things later that trickle out if somebody's in a slump and we're just swearing at the TV that such and such is playing like
yeah.
a steaming pile.
My
And
fantasy team, my get
yeah,
my
right,
parlay. You're screwing my parlay.
and we don't know, what, they've lost a family member, they're going through a divorce, they're being denied rights to see their child. They're just in depression for some inexplicable reason. Something triggered something in their life. So, the humanity that has come through in all of this is nothing short of phenomenal. And I think that it's something that we have to continue to talk about as a society as a whole. That we're not talking about as much as perhaps we should, but
For
it's no
sure.
longer taboo to talk about either.
Yeah, and I think these athletes coming forward and saying, "Hey, I'm not okay," and it's okay to say that, They have no idea. They think they know, but these athletes have no idea the amount of people they're helping just by saying that.
Oh, sure.
How many people the next day are picking up the phone because they saw DeMar DeRozan's talking, or they read Kevin Love's article, and now they want to seek out help,
Right.
or they want to find that friend that they thought was okay, but they weren't really sure. Now they're going to ask those questions to kind of find out, hey, is that person really okay? Do they need my support? And they're also choose their words a little bit more carefully when you talk to people, because, like you said, you never know what they're going through. So I think every athlete that's spoken out and talked about mental health has helped an enormous amount of people that they don't even realize.
Yeah, countless. I mean, we look from the outside looking in. We look at, you alluded to Simone Biles earlier, arguably the greatest gymnast to ever do it.
Yeah, for sure.
Drop dead gorgeous. What could possibly be going on with somebody who, when you look from the outside looking in, she's got it all. She's worth God knows how much money, but we're all human beings.
Yeah.
Going back to what we were just talking about a second ago with boxing. I mean, I remember when Tyson Fury was over 400 pounds, and there was a story. I don't want to say a great story, but there was a story that he relayed. And again, I'm going to paraphrase here. I believe he was driving a Ferrari, and he thought about just crashing through the side of a bridge and going off the bridge at 150, 175 miles an hour. And again, this is a guy who's a heavyweight champion of the world, talking about he thought about ending it all. Simone Biles, greatest gymnast of all time. This makes a lot of things. Naomi Osaka, arguably the best player in the women's game right now.
Yeah.
That these are people who have very real things that we don't know what's going on. I mean, we think about Tiger Woods 10, 12 years ago. Well, everything came out in a very spectacular fashion, but you can't help but wonder as his career kind of started to wane in terms of the titles that he was winning, well, what was going on behind the scenes that we don't know about? That's also another incident that, that actually happened not far from here in Rancho Palos Verdes, which is right up the street. And certainly happy to see in the last week or so as well that, looks like Tiger is going to be able to walk. And, I don't know whether or not he'll ever play competitively again. But just the fact that he will be able to move around and be a dad. And, again, that we see a lot of the humanity that has come out of sports in this past year.
Yeah, nah, for sure, for sure. Did you have one more moment?
Oh, I'm sure I do. If you put me on the spot, I would say, on a personal level, it would be Ron Rivera coming through non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and really doing everything he can to change the culture there in DC, and make them again at least a formidable opponent. I'm curious to see what will happen with Deshaun Watson. There are the retirement.
A new case just popped up when you said that. There's so many.
Yeah.
Legit. Somebody just filed paperwork on Christmas Eve.
The retirement of Drew Brees, who again is another Hollywood story. This is a guy who was injured in San Diego, was not AJ Smith's guy after he selected Phillip Rivers. He was left for dead 15 years ago, and to put together a Hall of Fame career like he did, take a traditionally struggling organization like the New Orleans Saints, put them on his back and win a Super Bowl there. He is without question and without exception the most iconic athlete in the history of the city of New Orleans.
Yeah, for sure.
There are a couple of other people that I'm sure I'm gleaning over that have retired or emerged. But what a fantastic year from us, just to be able to get sports back in some sort of level of normalcy. It's been really fantastic to see how we've been able to continue to work through the global pandemic and have what we have as sports fans. So
no, I agree. And being the optimist that I am, to see the progress we've made on the COVID front this year, I'm expecting even more progress in 2022 where we can be even safer or as safe as possible. And we'll see fans in stadiums, and we'll see a lot more interaction in the fans back in the stadium. But that's one of my top moments too. I just thought about it, college football, just seeing those. I remember that Virginia Tech game. I think it was one of the first games of the season, and just Enter the Sandman playing, the stadium jam packed. And you can say what you wanted to say. Oh my God, I watched the video. A lot of people weren't wearing masks. I didn't look at it that way. I just looked at it. This is something at some point, me as a sports fan, and maybe you had the same thoughts too throughout the course of the pandemic when it was at the height of it, height, Larry. But I really thought, will we ever see it again? Will we ever see it? So to see that stadium full of kids jumping up and down, Metallica blasting, I wasn't thinking about who has a mask, does have a mask. I was just thinking, man, I really at one point thought I would never see this again.
We missed it. We missed it sorely. And Virginia Tech is also a program, again, very near and dear to me. I cut my teeth in that market, and spent quite a few Saturday afternoons at Lane Stadium. So to be able to see, I remember that as well. The contrast between that and watching a boxing match or a baseball game being played before virtually nobody, a football game being played in an empty stadium, being able to see arenas and stadiums and ballparks lighting up again, being filled with people. It's something to behold, when you get 50, 60, 70,000 people together. And, again, I don't want to go too far down the political rabbit hole. If you are outside, I wear a mask. In California, we have to. But just being able to congregate like that again and get that return of normalcy in 2021. And hopefully on some level also kind of turn down the flame a little bit on the overall milieu of this country as a whole. That things have settled back down, that we're starting to get our house in order again. And I certainly hope that at some point in the not too distant future that this COVID nightmare is behind us. But that we've made unbelievable strides this past year. Tell you what, also, I want to give a shout out to, if you can see this here, I've got a Italian twine watch on, which is something that's very near and dear to me. So Italian Twine is a Black-owned watch company that comes out of Portsmouth, Virginia. I spent some time there as a young kid, and they're doing really fantastic things. So, looking fine in my Italian Twine.
Very dope.
Shout out to Michael Vick.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Yeah. Rich kid too. Black-owned company as well. The YouTube sponsor for the 19 Media Group as well. But hey, man, I know that you and I, Larry, could go on 5 or 6 hours. There's so many topics that we didn't even touch.
For the people who are out there watching, some of our conversations that we have had in cars or sitting across from one another at a restaurant or whatever, or just hanging out at a bar, are so unbelievably worthy of being recorded and put into some sort of format, whether it's YouTube or a podcast in general. But Joe, it's always a pleasure to catch up with you. Please give my best to your family. Big shout out to Mrs. C, and let's do this again real soon.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. The pleasure was all mine. Thank you so much for hopping on. I mean, it's Christmas Eve. So, only real friends would hop on and record a show on Christmas Eve. I mean, maybe a small to do is that COVID, we can't go outside anyway. Maybe if it was 2017, we both would have been like, Christmas Eve, I think you might be drunk already.
Trying to enter. Yeah, well, I had a wife at that time and whatever else, but that's another story. So.
But I figured, hey, man, Christmas Eve, we all locked inside anyway. Might as well and have a good, fun conversation, touch on a lot of topics. And like I said, we'll definitely have you come back on again for sure, man, sooner rather than later. But thank you so much for hopping on the show, man. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you, brother.
All right. Man, fun conversation. I want to thank Larry again for joining me on this week's edition. Fun conversation. Love talking to that guy. We can go on and on forever. I mean, if we had no time limit between the two of us, we could probably go 3 or 4 hours just talking about different topics in the world of sports. That's a guy I've known for 20 plus years who I know loves sports as much as I do. But as always, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. But make sure you check out the rest of the great content available for you at 19mediagroup.com. We are running these content streets, whether it's YouTube of dope interviews, whether it's podcasts, wide variety. And it's not just sports, it's entertainment, it's music, it's wrestling. If you could think about it and you're into it, there's a 99.9% chance you can find some kind of content about it on the 19 Media Group website. So I want to support and shout out all my friends on the 19 Media Group as well. Like I said at the beginning of the show, I want to wish you and yours a very safe and happy holidays, and I will catch you guys next week.